we have our second panel session of the day. So I think it was in the first panel session that Mark Crouch said, do you remember the 1980s? And I remember the 1980s because there was a song called Just an Illusion by a British group called Imagination. And the title of this second panel session is Supply Chain Integration, Reality or Illusion. So reality or illusion. And to helm this panel session, we have, well, I'm delighted to welcome my fellow organizing committee member, Sanjay Desai. And Sanjay is the founder of Humana International. And he's also been a regular feature at LogiSYM conferences over the years. So Sanjay, welcome to the stage. And I assume you'll be introducing the rest of your panel members as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope everybody can hear. We are a very small crowd today. So thanks a lot, Bob. And thank you first to everybody, each one of you who chose to be here today. You could have been anywhere else. You gave your social, professional, as well as personal time. I hope I'm okay without the mask, right, while speaking. Yeah, thank you. So thank you. Thanks a lot for being here. What we do is all for you, and your presence and your questions is something that gives us a pep. I just noticed that the intensity was a bit lacking, so please raise questions. No questions is dumb. That is what feeds us in. So please, my panel, please come in. Scott, Roland. Mark, don't want you to be missing again. Just kidding. Don't take my seat. Here's my seat. Thank you. Do we have Wolfgang on the screen? Morning. Thank you so much. We have a big panel today, 1+3 here and then 1 on the screen. So we heard a lot of good words today. We talked about transformation, and I know a few of us here have some discerning opinions here, Mark, right? So anyway, we'll talk about it. And then we also heard about sustainability a lot. We also heard about integration. And what's integration? So let this fantastic panel decipher what is about integration today, whether it is illusion or reality. And this is something that I hate myself of introducing others. Self-introduction is better. But we have Scott Phillips here, sitting on the left here. He is the senior director with Eco Shoes. I'm so sorry about it. Right? He handles production and sourcing. An international speaker, a leader. I know him since the last 10 years, and has done a wonderful job in terms of transformation, in terms of planning optimizations, customer service integration. In many of the companies prior to that, he was with General Cables, prior to that with Blue Scope Steel. Next is Roland Chong, Senior Director and Head of Global Supply Chain for Quaisian. I hope I pronounced the name right, Quaisian. Quaisian. Again, a very international speaker, leader. I met him in 2005 when he actually interviewed me. He doesn't realize that, but you were in Nike and I was in Apple. And I don't know why I was making a change in Apple to Nike. Before that, he was with Estee Lauder, and before that, he was with Nike. And then Mark, everyone knows, so I may not introduce him. And then, of course, Mr. Wolfgang Lehmacher. I hope I have pronounced your name correctly. Apologies if it is not. Highly respected leader, not just in Singapore, Asia, or even globally, a board member. And I can tell you for sure, if I have to start telling the names of the companies that he sits as on the board member, we might as well finish the whole panel today. So I will not do that, Wolfgang, and I hope you don't mind. So let's start with our panel today. Now we'll start with Wolfgang. What does supply chain integration mean to you?
Yeah, thank you very much for being here, and thanks for everyone who joined us for that conversation. I would like to focus on one aspect of integration, which from my perspective makes the whole difference between what I very often call the 21st century way of managing supply chain versus what we had before. and that's data integration or integration through data. So when I hear supply chain integration, it is all about data. It's all about the flow of data end to end and back or across, because people who know me better know that I don't like that much the word supply chain, but it's so established. For me, it's therefore supply chain networks. So the data flow across supply chain networks, that is for me integration. And how does it work? And what do we need for data integration? It's also a process. It is about data standards. It's about protocols. It's about collaboration. I have been in a few panels and discussion last week, and data sharing is still a very, very big topic. Some are very positive about data sharing and think it is happening. Others are less positive. But data sharing is a very big element, and collaboration. And then we are still lacking analytics, because there is a big difference between data and information. So a lot of people use this interchangeable, but it's not. So we need analytics to make at each step, at each point along the chain, to make sense out of that data and convert it into meaningful, actionable information. And then there is what does it do? Supply chains live from synchronization. So this information should help to synchronize the different parts and unchoke choked areas we have currently. And I can just point to the supply chain situation today. The situation in the West Coast ports, which is in fact not a ports challenge anymore. It's really a synchronization challenge from supply to demand. So synchronization is an important element as an output of integration. And why are we doing this? If we integrate through data and then put the other elements on top, which are required and which I have mentioned, then it's all about increasing asset productivity. And that means reduce errors, reduce delays, increase efficiency, and also improve the carbon footprint.
Thank you, Wolfgang. Scott.
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything Wolfgang has mentioned, and I think it's a pretty comprehensive answer. Maybe I can bring a reality to the words that Wolfgang mentioned. In Echo, we are a very integrated company. We have leather making, we have component making, we have manufacturing, we have our own warehousing, we have our own last mile distribution assets, and we have our own retail stores and online platforms. So by definition, we're integrated. Having said that, we should naturally then have plenty of data running through our business. We should have plenty of information, plenty of collaboration, plenty of transformation in different areas, plenty of things at work, and certainly in non-disruptive times, that was the case. Integration now, a word in Echo, is very disrupted, because we found out we had dependencies on things that we can't control and we can't trust and we can't rely on. And they are our partners, whether they be transactional or contractual, or true partners that will go out of their way to help us. So this notion of supply chain integration, in Echo's case, company integration, it is good as it is today, and then tomorrow will be a new day. So even getting data through Echo is not synced, is not synchronized. And this is a big challenge, even within the four walls of one company, talking about supply chain integration. So away from the buzzwords in academia, even in our own organization, we struggle with integration across our supply chain, our network, our value chain, to deliver efficiencies and and profit.
Thanks. Sounds interesting. We'll talk about it towards the end, Scott. You said you are integrated, but we'll talk about it later. Roland.
Yeah, for a moment, I thought you were probably one of those very integrated organization until the last part of it that you said you guys struggle. But obviously, I think everyone struggles too in the very disruptive supply chain today. For me, I think supply chain integration, whether it's illusion or reality, you have to ask yourself, take a step back and probably even break it down into different parts, right? So integration could mean a variety of things. But I think typically when everyone asks supply chain, the first thing that comes to the mind of supply chain folks is always processes, integration of processes. That's all about it. But if you take a different spin out of it, right? You look at it, it could be an horizontal integration among your peers within the organization, internally. You could have a vertical where even different leadership structure, integration. All right. And you could also look at it beyond your four walls of your organization to your suppliers and partners, how integrated you are. So I think integration has many, many folds. And each topic, obviously, you can spend many, many minutes discussing on each element of it. So I think we just need to be specific in terms of integration. Data is obviously like what Wolfgang said earlier is actually crucial, synchronization. But I think from a reality perspective, we can actually look at it and say, you can have all the best information in the world in front of you. But if your organization is not integrated as it should be, you will still fall apart.
Thanks, Roland. Mark.
You stole the words right out of my mouth. It's the people. It's the people understanding how they work with the data and how they go about getting this futuristic idea of what their supply chain is. I don't like the word supply chain. It is the ecosystem that we're going to be working in the future, but it's the people. When you look at the whole integration that you have these pillars, you have to make them work together. But who really goes in the forefront? And it is the people on the bottom line that are going to work with this data going forward that can make that big change in the future. So it is the people. I can't say it better than three panelists already said, but it is the people that I truly believe that will change this.
And then what you said was, Ray alluded to in the morning, it's difficult to find a partner, right? And then to integrate across wide, horizontally or vertically.
But that's why the ecosystem is there.
Exactly.
It's not a supply chain. You can't find those partners in that way.
And good that you're saying you don't like supply chain today because I'm already past getting a job now anywhere. So I would never work for you in my life, actually. Wonderful. So I want to go back to Scott because you said you're integrated and that picks my brain, right? There are critical influencing factors, right? An example is we say, what is the maturity of my organization? How would you define that?
Maturity.
Some influencing factors. Example was maturity.
Okay.
Which are those critical factors which lead you to be fully integrated?
Yeah.
And you can take your own scope. Doesn't matter really.
Yeah. Okay. I'll take the last 7 years of my life trying to mature Echo supply chain or network organization, and building that up through Asia, through people, through systems, through process, through governance, through data. I feel like still we're a puppy dog with big paws. We fumble around. We have a lot of asset. We have a lot of data. We have a lot of people coming in and out, maybe not understanding the fundamentals. I think we see a lot of. Okay, I'm going to elaborate on the people part. Sorry, guys, but anyone who comes into our organisation who doesn't want to be digital, doesn't want to be an analyst of data, doesn't want to dig deeper than what's in front of them, then we need to get rid of straight away, because that's not the curiosity that we need to grow the maturity. So I'd say even in a legacy organisation, it's been around 50 plus years, 55 plus years as Echo, we're still immature in integration, and it's a constant effort. We'll never reach the end. We'll never be integrated. I think maybe the semantics of the English language can be a little confusing as well. But if you stop chasing integration, if you stop chasing efficiencies if you stop chasing the curiosity of digging into data, understanding how things connect better, understanding how networks can perform more efficiently, understanding dependencies that you have, then you will stop growing. And if you're a puppy dog with big paws and you want to stop growing, then you'll become very annoying to the marketplace after a very short time.
English language is indeed very confusing, because I got confused with your first answer and second answer. Doesn't matter, just kidding. So Roland, I want to ask you questions about humans and machines, and Mark brought the point of people. But if companies really want to integrate, right, their supply chain, the future is so uncertain to me as I look at it, right? It's so disruptive today. The future of work also is different. Now we need to strike a right balance between human, the skill sets, and the word called transformation or machines. How do you achieve this? Is there a magic wand?
No, I don't think this is new at all. There's a lot of conferences that all of us attend, and IoT, digitalization, automation. All these buzzwords are often used, so it becomes right now part and parcel of the DNA of what we're trying to do in the business. All right, and if you could just integrate it into supply chain or value chain. So machine will, whether you like it or not, be part of us. The challenge right now for all of us is how do we actually use this machine, the analytics that we're going to draw out of it, to complement the human side of it. So there's a lot of the people element that we talked about earlier, but it cannot be just human, because then you continue with Excel spreadsheet, which in itself, by the way, is also machine. It's a question of a low-end machine. So now we're trying to get into the next level of a high-end machine that provides us either statistical forecast, statistical understanding, historic data, and so forth, for predictability in the future. But that is only just one element of it. In the earlier speaker, they talk about efficiency. So you cannot do efficiency without machine. So I think it's important that at this point in time, companies, whether you like it or not, have to adopt to machine support, make it a DNA of the organization, definitely. And at the end of the day, how do you complement that throughout the whole organization's value chain, not just on supply chain?
Whole organization value chain, enterprise-wide. Wonderful. Mark, I want to bring you on screen here, and we are face to face, not on webinar anyway. So means to an end, right? And I want you to talk about where is the actual start, right? Because you want to achieve integration, you also want to achieve sustainability. So what would come first? You also have to have collaboration, and we heard there are not many great partners there. How do you achieve all these things, and which is the means and which is the end actually?
So I've worked in procurement for 22 years. I started in finance, where we had to buy pens and paper. Today, you need a PhD to do a category. It's crazy. The thing is, in procurement today, because it's a little part of your supply chain, but I don't know why supply chain always comes down and hits procurement on the head, because we always have to deliver. We onboard suppliers today with now looking at quality. It has to be the right quality. They have to be able to deliver. Okay, so that's the service. We have to mitigate the risk, so we need a lot of suppliers. So we have this onboarding process. So that's the change. Now, and I took the jump into sustainable procurement. Sustainability is going to come now and say, oh, the suppliers have to have the right quality, have to write the right service, have to write the right sustainability figures. They can't have these bad emissions anymore. So now every time we have to change the supply base. So this is why, from a supply chain perspective and an ecosystem, the ecosystem will win, because we have to have that flexibility to be able to change our partners and flexibility to change direction on how to deliver. So what do we start with? We look at our supply base, and we change the supply base to make them follow us on this journey. Because if companies don't do that, and I know, so I'm from Denmark, so Echo is very close to my heart, but it's an amazing company. It has amazing shoes, right? And that has not changed. They keep that old thinking of how those shoes are, but now putting digitalization on. They're being flexible in the way that they go to market and so on. So you have to have your norms in order, but your supply base has to follow you all the way through, and that will change in the future. Flexibility, definitely. Sustainable to start with.
Yeah, sure. Roland, go ahead.
Now, I'd like to add to this. I think that's a great point that was brought up. I think there's a dilemma right now between getting your organization integrated with a supplier, for example. All right, so you want to achieve that because, for example, if you are a shipper and you want to integrate as much as you can with a 3PL, so that you get information, dynamic information, real time, all right, to make a lot of decisions. Now, at the same time, you have this ecosystem right now that is harming you and saying that, you know what, you need to have flexible supplier management. Now, it takes years for you to actually establish interaction or digital connectivity with 3PL, right? It takes for year one. A lot of investment goes into building that relationship and integration. Can you think about it? Come next year, 12 months later, you have an ecosystem pressure to say now supplier B now is on stream, gives you better costs, give you everything greenhouse, but then now you have to switch into another integration process and then forego the one that you just spent millions or thousands and months trying to integrate with supply. So there is a huge dilemma right now in supply chain, trying to balance between integration, strong integration against an external factor right now called the go green.
Fantastic. So this is the question for Wolfgang on the screen. We heard integration, we heard dilemmas, we heard challenges, we heard man, machine, we heard balancing, right? So there is something called innovation paradox, right? When you have the ability to innovate, your intensity or the urgency may be low. So taking that point further and whatever we discussed so far, Wolfgang, where is the starting point? Is there a magic formula that organizations can really start? And where?
We have heard a few very important factors. Scott spoke about the fact that in an integrated organization, we need people that enjoy digitization. So, and then we heard the term ecosystem. We heard the term DNA. And I think that's where everything starts, because we haven't heard the word culture, which in fact is the bracket to the three elements which I mentioned before. So to get to an integrated supply chain network, we need to have a group, a community of like-minded people that have a digital-first culture. And I think Roland brought it also to the point, if the people were the factor, then we can just continue. The people, the right people, according to Scott, I think will drive incremental innovation. Coming to the question, will drive incremental innovation. They are curious, they love the new tools, but they are thrown into an organization which is or which is not integrated. If it is, like Scott says and outlined that his organization fulfills that criteria, then yes, that may be enough for the moment to drive incremental innovation. But if it's not, if it's a people, manual process-driven organization, you need disruptive innovation. You need to completely change the model. I can give an example of a digital-first organization. That's Amazon. It's one of the biggest logistics groups in the world. Then you have Taobao and everything behind that. These are major logistics organizations, but they are data-driven, they are digital-driven, and they are clearly different from everything else what we have seen. We have seen the rise of Amazon into the aviation sectors within months, becoming one of the leading cargo airlines. So why could they do this? Because they have a very different DNA, they have a very different culture, they have a very different approach to business, and that approach is digital first. And I think it all starts with the mind shift that, yes, people are important, but people fall under the umbrella of a integrated model based on data. And also coming to the comment, good times, bad times, innovation high, innovation low, I think we need to decouple it from that. It's a question of the DNA, it's a question of the needs. Companies need to identify their gaps, map out what is out there or what needs to be built, and then do the needful.
That's interesting. Decoupled innovation. Okay, thanks a lot. Great point. We'll come back to that point actually again. And somebody said culture eats strategy for breakfast. I don't know what, but since morning you're so correct. I heard so many three-letter acronyms called TLAs. It's almost like having a soup, which we did not have today. Anyway, further. So it is like a soup of TLAs today. You have been very quiet here, right? I need some questions, guys. Otherwise, I know some 5 people you're going to be on the spot. Believe me. Can anybody raise a hand and ask a question? Thank you so much, sir. I don't have any dollars in my pocket, otherwise I would have given you. So sorry.
Can I
Send
take
a-
my
send a
mask
debit
off, or I have
note.
to talk through my mask? Marcus Lemaster, I work for Schneider Electric. I just want to comment on the earlier session and this one, because I agree with what's been said. But when we talk about integration, we talk about ecosystems, we talk about these pieces. One thing, and I think we're getting the culture, it's mentioned a bit, but one thing that I see missing, I'm glad to hear people came up here, but I'd almost put the word is relationships. As we talk about this and we're talking about these integration, it's all about data. We're talking about data, people doing analysis, the digital world. I agree with all that. But what I saw missing in the last 2 years as things have gone the direction they have is problems got solved by picking up the phone and calling somebody. You know, great that data is integrated, great we're sharing data, but if suddenly there's no supply, demand explodes, you know, those types of things have been solved by picking up the phone and having relationships. So I guess I want to throw that one out there and just ask a question, what the thoughts of the panelists are on that one, because I agree with all those pieces. And even in our organization and stuff, and I look at the challenges we have great data, we're doing AI, we're doing machine learning, we've got great data, we've got functional silos, and ultimately in the end, it comes down and says, well, the sales department, you know, gave us a forecast that was half of what they actually ended up selling. It's great that we had data and programs. So anyways, I just want to throw that out there and see if you have some comments.
Thank you so much. Yeah, please. Mark.
Yeah,
Keep
you
it
guys
brief,
have an
Mark.
awesome company. I kind of follow you on LinkedIn and I read about you guys. Awesome. I mentioned in the first panel that I was in, I have a phrase and it's called Q plus S plus R plus F equals P4. And that is the quality, the service, the risk and flexibility equals the performance, the price, the profit, and the people. Putting that together, that flexibility is grabbing the phone. It's in the relationship that you need into your environment, into the ecosystem. I agree. For me, it's always really irritation because people will call procurement at any point in time and say, I need you to, you know, get the price down, and I need you to do this, kick them in the whatever, right? Because my supplier's not working with me. Well, what are you going to do without a supplier? You can't deliver. And what are you going to do to that supplier to help him or her deliver so you can grab that phone? Relationship is all about it. And supplier relationship management is something that has been forgotten over the last couple of years until the pandemic hit. Wow. They were our best friends. And we don't care how much, you know, when I was working at Dyson, we had small components that we had to go buy, and they were normally 1 cent. We would go buy them for 25 cents because we needed that, because the market was, but somebody was selling them for $1. So those relationships are important.
Yeah,
I agree.
Scott.
Yeah, maybe I can add a little bit. I agree. Procurement probably became a best friend of everyone in the last 2 years, just to keep things going. But it raises a good point. In supply chain, whether you're planning procurement or logistics or whatever function you play, you'll normally talk to a core bunch of stakeholders, internally, externally. If you had been doing that the past 2 years, then you're probably not in this room. Because if you're not dealing with 50% new stakeholders every day, every week, every month, as a supply chain professional, you're not doing your job anymore. You're not, because you need to be flexible. You need to be agile, to your statement, Mark. So, you can't just keep doing things the way you're doing it. Keep working on sales data. Now it's half. Okay, what do? We don't know, because it's never been like this. That's when you start talking to people. What are other companies doing? What is another industry doing? What is Schneider's a B2B, right? But you've got a very good retail front as well. What are you doing? I mean, we don't sell electronics, but we sell shoes. What are you doing? How are you handling that? What's happening? So yeah, I agree. It's the relationships, not just in your four walls, not just with your core stakeholders that you deal with and you're comfortable with, but everyone. And that's what a supply chain professional does these days.
And as Mark said, is this something blessing in the disguise in the form of COVID, Scott?
Is it
Is it something like a blessing in the disguise?
Oh, geez, Sanjay, I don't know.
It's a wake-up call.
It's a wake-up call. I'm tired. I'm exhausted because, I like my comfort zones as well, as much as anyone. So yeah, for 2 years, it's been smack bang challenging every day. But yes, wake-up call, a blessing in disguise. It puts supply chain on the map in the boardroom, and that's really important.
Yeah. Volker, will you raise your hand? Just a minute. Did you raise your hand?
Yeah, I
Wolfgang?
raised my hand, but I think we all agree that relationship is important and that people are important. But what digitization integration does is make people better. So you will not have people who cannot build relationships or manage supply chain, buy transport capacity. You cannot make underperforming people good by integration and digitization. So the human have the right people that can build the relationships, and the relationships kept us afloat, is important. What I would like to question a little bit is that everybody was forgetting relationships. If that had been the case, so that we had neglected relationships for many years, if that had been the case, we all had sunk, because it were exactly the relationships that existed that helped us. So those companies that are performing well had already built very good relationships. Those companies that hadn't done it struggled anyway. So I wouldn't put them all into the same bucket.
Yeah.
Can I
Agree.
just jump in for a last one?
Yes, quick one, because I have Steph on the call.
No, because you literally hit the nail in not the coffin, but somewhere. Literally, because in the first question when we was asked, what do you think supply chain integration is? I miss saying this very critical point. Other than horizontal and vertical integration, it is leadership integration. I think culture that was brought up earlier is actually formulated by the leadership, right? The ground folks can try as much as you can to build a culture. It will never shake the trees if the leaders do not have that integrated mindset. So back to integration, the leadership example, the exemplary attitude of leaders in the organization are superbly critical to building that culture of integration and bringing relationship into the organization. And I'm speaking this right now as our company is actually going through this, what we call the Empower initiative. And it's been put in as one of the #1 focus in the next 12, 24 months. It is actually also built into all our leaders' KPI, I would say personal goals, to ensure that 10, 20% of your goals has the Empower attributes built in. And that's how you actually move the culture into the direction that you want.
First class. Steph.
No, I'd just like to come back to the idea of integrating data and to the point about relationships, because I think if we're able to integrate that data to, across supply chain partners and between, partners in the ecosystem, to use the term that we've been using this morning, I think that actually allows us to concentrate our efforts where we do actually put the relationship. One of the things that we'll be talking about tomorrow with the AI panel is, where is the place for people in this? And I think that being able to actually address and prioritize those relationships based on the data, and I know Schneider has a fantastic system for looking at data and all that, but I think there is a role for this to help prioritize those relationships and prioritize our efforts, because we are frankly exhausted and we do need to do that. And I was just wondering if Scott or Roland, in your companies, if you've seen data have a role or support the decision making, be able to enable you to prioritize where you place or concentrate your efforts in terms of relationship building, and in some cases it might be firefighting, in other cases it might be solution building, but does it help?
Yeah, our data agenda comes from the board down, comes from the supervisory board down. So this is a non-negotiable. So it automatically builds relationships, because if you don't want to do what your boss's boss is saying or the owner of the company is saying, then where do you exist within the company? So yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have to build those organizations designed around how we're going to feed data in and where the investments are going. And if the investments are not balanced, or you're lopsided on your investments in data integration, then you'll get found out somewhere, sometime. A lot of companies have been found out in the last 2 years because they are under pressure to deliver. My point of sales data disappeared overnight in Europe, right? Because there's no stores open. So do we stop manufacturing? We need people to make decisions then. It's not AI, it's not data, it's not systems. And the mandate's coming from the top down in ECHO, which is really, really positive.
This is what Mark said in the morning, right? You need to go back to the whiteboard, actually, right? You still go back to the 80s and see how
you can
things
erase a
work.
whiteboard, Sanjay. So that's also good.
I might as well do that. I'm 60 already. Roland, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, no. So again, depending on where you are in organization, in terms of cash flow and in terms of profitability and gross margin and so forth, when you are in a state where you have to decide between investing into a digital network or against building capacities in your factory, given such a disruptive environment that we are in these days, there is a huge challenge in terms of trying to come to a decision. And for us, we are actually going through it right now in trying to balance and finding the sweet spot around how much money do you put into digitalization, the network, so that you can actually improve productivity and efficiency. But at the same time, there's a cry for capacity building, given all the inventory that is so short these days and lead time extended. So it's a huge dilemma, and you just have to work through, take a risk in any of the decision that you make. Probably even say, do a delay investment in digitalization, because capacity today is far outweigh importance than the efficiency that we are going after.
Yeah,
I think risk is the key factor. No matter what, the decision from the data is the risk.
First class. There's a question. Thank you, sir. Guys, a bit faster because we have one more question coming up, I can see.
Right. Hi, this is Charlotte here from Suez. So a lot of fantastic points, and I completely agree. My thought on reality versus illusion, I would rather call it integration is more of...
You should be here.
The holy grail.
Please go ahead. Yeah.
Probably the next time, Sanjay. Yeah, the next time, hopefully. Reality is somewhere in between, right? And a lot of it is driven by the culture, the people, and the vision. To your point about it comes from the top, right? They said Roland and Scott. Now, it's very easy to get caught up within this maelstrom that we have with the pandemic and the pressure and the buzzwords coming from the Gartners, the consultancies and all that. But at the end of the day, a lot of the companies that have had very good supply chains are able to ride through it. Companies that have found that they're probably 10 years, 15 years behind have struggled through it.
Your question,
right?
please.
The question is, there's a lot of bottom line pressure, right? CEOs are going to have an eye on that. how does it all fit at the end of the day within, for example, investment capacity and all that? Or do we say, hey, this is all fine, but the bottom line pressure is there. Two years down the line, I'm still going to just go back looking quarter by quarter cost, but how does that all fit within this whole integration discussion, and where do you want to go?
Thanks, Jarrod. Yes, yes.
I can take this. Probably related to what I just said earlier. Risk management, I think organization, depending on the level of comfort in meeting shareholders' expectation. So as an example, if you used to have 20% as your profit, and given the situation that you are today, all right, you do all the forecasts and you do all your finance analysis, and you said in the coming next 12 months, it's going to be at 17%. Does that meet your shareholders' expectation? If it's not, then you have to go back to the drawing board and then say, where can I trim it down? Is it digitalization, which actually, by the way, will actually affect efficiency, but you will not see the efficiency being a drawing board, because everyone is expected to do the same, if not more. So therefore, on paper, you will tend to sacrifice investment that are not visible, that you cannot actually see the result immediately in your P&L. But you can then divert and say, however, in order to increase sales or increase pricing or continue with the profit that we used to generate, what do we need to do right now? We have to then go look at the bottom line, because it's all about bottom line. If the top line is fixed already for the forecast, then where do you go next in the P&L? It's the bottom line. And the bottom line is all about depreciation of investment, for example, or driving more efficiency.
Yeah, you talked about leadership, and Scott actually alluded to it as well. And then Sharad brought in a good point, right? Scott, for you, right, I would like to go back to you, because you have been an SNOP and an IBP champion for so many years, right? And SNOP has been a beaten horse, actually. It moved to integrated. So how that role now evolves into the future, where do you really still do IBPs, or you don't call it integrated, you call something else? And how does that happen more from a leadership perspective, as Roland alluded to earlier?
SNOP, IPB, ABC, XYZ, doesn't really matter. It's a treadmill for business right now. It keeps you fit. If you had a good SNOP process up until now, you've done very well. Most SNOPs have probably had their foundations rocked over the last 2 years with the amount of disruption that we've faced. Those companies who have dropped that process or that governance or that stream of that type of working, probably you're going to be in trouble. Those ones who have persisted with it as a treadmill, it's boring. It's maybe not as effective as you hope it would be, but it keeps you somewhat fit through the organization, keeps that integration trying to happen. So yeah, SNOP is important, IPB, whatever you want to call it, there's going to be a new name in the next decade for it. So just stay with it. The process is getting your data aligned, and it's getting your synchronization through your process, so you can understand and help make better decisions and help people understand where they fit into the organization as well. So for us, we're treating it as a treadmill at the moment. It's one of those necessary evils at 5 a.m. in the morning, just to stay fit. And then you can do other things in the business that maybe are a little bit more, you can embellish a little bit more.
Excellent. You want to add something, Roland?
Yeah, we are actually in the heart of implementing SNOP in our organization.
All the best to you.
And exactly. And it goes back to the R word that was raised earlier, because you can have the best IBP system that will be dumped into your organization. But if the R, which is the relationship, or the people, or the leaders are not in sync with driving that, it will fail. And we have been seeing a lot of struggles within, the organization in this area, where traditionally, these folks has always been selling without having a need to forecast. Those good old days. But the moment you try to put in a structured formal program in there and force them to say, now you need to tell me how much you want to sell, when you want to sell, and so forth, then that becomes a challenge in itself, because they will come to you and say, I would rather get my sales force out in the field to sell than sit down in a meeting room with you 2 hours trying to discuss what forecast is. So the mentality, the the mindset, the culture, the relationship, all comes in this process of trying to integrate. And to me, it is 70% of work that needs to be managed in that area, and 30% is just that system.
Fabulous. And you talked about R, you talked about relationships. I want to get Wolfgang on the screen. And Wolfgang, one of the R's is roles, right? And then one of the S is skills that we already talked about at people. Now, the future roles are going to be dynamic, and we actually do not know how much those dynamism would be, right? There is a major cultural shift also, right? And as you talked about earlier, the focus is going to be on outcomes. Now, how does this impact either negatively or positively on the integration aspect of it?
Yeah, I would love to answer the question, but there's so much which I've said before, which kind of, let's say, make me say different things. So I think, answer the question very quickly, I think the new workforce, much more agile, much more dynamic, much flatter organizations will definitely help integration, right? So that's my view. But I would like to pull us a little bit out of the comfort zone that we say it's all about bottom line and people. Because does that mean, to the question which was raised before, we just don't integrate, or we postpone integration and digitization for the next 5 to 10 years? Does it mean that we just ignore the direct-to-consumer trend? Does it mean that we just ignore that a lot of companies survive because they moved from physical channel to digital channel? Does it mean that we ignore the trend of e-commerce at all and we say, okay, we are not part of the party? So I think it's not as easy as it sounded in the last round from my perspective. It's always about bottom line, of course. But if you're in manufacturing, maybe it's a different thing. And what Roland said, okay, it's about capacity. Do we really think and want to say, okay, we throw more of the old to the same problem, or we throw better to the new problem, right? Pushing more into the US supply chain, I don't think that will help. So that's a bit my thinking. I believe that the world went digital, and the last 2 years were a massive leap into that direction. And there are a lot of new breed companies that will change the way we are doing business. And that needs to be integrated from my perspective. And that will come exactly, Sanjay, with what you are saying, with a new type of people who have also much different expectations. If we have 25 years old, 30 years old that come into the workforce now, or the new generations, they have a very, very different mindset. They are not just, they don't want to work as we have worked, right? And Sanjay, I'm probably in the same age class. A new world is coming up, and that's what I think is what we should keep in mind. And integration will come, whether we bet on it or not.
Perfect. We have about 6 minutes left for 12:20, right? So, Mark, I want to come back to you on what Gartner says. There are 3 things, and I need to read them well. The game changers for supply chain, and I know you don't like the word supply chain, so I want to put you on spot here. Risk and resiliency, 1. Future of work, and 3, collaboration in supply chain ecosystem. Now, given the current environment that you are in, right, what would be your approach to embrace these 3 and climb the journey of end-to-end integration?
I think a lot of things, and we're probably going to say the same things. It's looking at the risk that we have in the ecosystem today. Putting an end-to-end environment, let's call it an environment, between companies going forward. How do companies work together? From the data perspective, if I could touch upon that as well, the risk of sharing data between 2 companies in the same sector. There's an IP thing, and we're talking about that, but going to market together because the consumer is asking. I think the bottom line question here is also, what does the consumer want? And then you take your end-to-end to the consumer. So it goes back. Instead of starting, it starts from the consumer and travels backwards. And when you look at that, that also changes the culture. A lot of things that Wolfgang said, I agree with. The data, first of all, will drive decision-making. You're implementing the KPIs of driving from the leadership perspective, but you're being evaluated from the employee perspective. If that change doesn't happen, that culture will never change, and you won't get to the market, to the consumer, and that ecosystem is just on culture people. Then there's the platforms. Then it's how we work together, how we integrate it. And the whole thing is identified with risk, no matter what. So risk and resilience is the most important of those three. And then you work in to embed that and integrate it.
Thank you so much. We got last 3 minutes, so I'll just quickly go over with everybody, starting with Wolfgang. Final thought, illusion or reality? One word answer.
Reality.
Thank you. It took a while. Yes. Scott.
Can I have more than one word, please, Sanjay? Yes, it's reality. You've got to see it as a competitive advantage. To do it is competitive advantage. The consumer will buy your product, will take all the aspects of everything, all the dependencies. If you can integrate your ecosystem, environment, supply chain, value chain, network, whatever you want to call it, and that becomes a reality. It's money in the bottom. It's money in the pocket for the business.
Money in the pocket, absolutely. Roland?
Yeah, using the word DNA, I think it's a building block of life, of integration. So you cannot do without it. It is already on stream. The only question right now is, whether you cherry pick in segments of integration, if you have the money, or if you're going to go full swing in investment.
Big bang approach. Perfect. Mark?
100% reality. We just have to do it together.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your intensity and the questions, guys. Give a big round of applause for the panel.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Over to you, Bob.